this Hangouts on Air is live. So they should be able to see us pretty soon.
Oh man, getting fancy. Are we going to be able to see them?
Yeah, if you go to the YouTube page, we'll be able to see the chat. So we should have 9 people watching right now.
Yeah.
And if they chat to us, we can see it. But you don't know if we're going to get any trolls or anything. So
9 people just right now. And if they chat to us, we can see it.
Okay, now I hear us over on your computer.
If we're going
So
to
you want to mute. You want to mute that,
9
like the YouTube page.
And if they chat to us, we can see it. Okay, now I hear us over on your computer. If we're going to, you want to mute that.
Okay, so
the YouTube page.
Oh, I see. It was from Twitter. That was very surprising. I had muted the YouTube one, which was why I was surprised.
Oh, you're live streaming on Twitter?
Well, no, I just had the YouTube tab open. It looks like my friends Adam and Corey are here. That's fun.
Cool. I think we dropped a viewer since we started, so we're doing great so far.
Oh man, perfect. I've got stage fright already.
And you got your chamomile there,
I do
Logan?
have my chamomile ready to go.
Good. Welcome. Let's just get it started. Let's do like an official intro thing.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Well, welcome to my first edition of Conversations with Chamomile. This is going to be my new podcast. And I'm inspired by the Justin Murphy show, Other Life, where he's been doing a bunch of live streams lately, having conversations with people that have interesting things to say. And so I'm going to steal that idea and not paying him any royalties. And I'm going to have a conversation with you because I know you have interesting things to say.
Well, I appreciate that. We've had a lot of interesting conversations, so I imagine there's some dialectical magic we can spin in front of this camera.
Yeah. So, how you doing tonight?
You know, I'm a little tired. I had a couple of drinks with some coworkers a few hours ago. Surprisingly enough, we got started at 3, and then I stopped because I don't really drink that much. And so I'm a little tired. I had some dinner. I cleaned up a little bit and pretty ready to relax this weekend. How are you?
Not bad. I work from home and remotely, so that's been interesting to adapt to. I don't really have a very clean demarcation of the work day from the non-work day. But with the days getting shorter and the darkness coming, I actually find it really good for creativity. So I had some thought of going out and seeing people tonight, but then I just treasure so much like having this many hours of darkness before bed. Like I wanted to stay in and make something. So I'm really happy that you were able to join me.
Nice. I've been really surprised by the amount of smoke. It's been like dusk all day. Even at noon, it looks like dust.
I love it. It's so good for my productivity. Like rainy days are great for my productivity, and we just don't get them in the Bay Area. So like having the sky full of smoke from wildfires is the next best thing.
That's true. There is this like beautiful golden haze that's been all over everything. Feels like we almost have seasons.
Yeah, the sun was covered up by the smoke, and it was like this orange disc in the sky that you could look at without burning your eyes. It was kind of cool.
It's like an apocalyptic event.
Yeah. Reminded me of Burning Man, but not quite as fun.
Oh man. Well, you're having as much fun as you let yourself have, so
yeah, it's true. Let's see. So before we get into any serious conversation, which I think we will have serious conversation. So, people just hang out. Oh, we got some chat going on.
Oh my god.
Awesome.
We got a bunch of people. We got emojis.
Yeah. So that's doing good. People saying hi to each other. Someone said it looks like Luke Skywalker on Tatooine today. That's going good. So is it? I had to ask you first though. Is it Virgin or Chad to stay in at night and talk to your friend on over like computer video?
You know, I was actually thinking about that.
Oh, were you?
when I was coming home from work, I was thinking, you know, should I feel good about doing this or feel bad? And I think honestly, there's a little bit of Chad in every virgin, and there's a little virgin in every Chad. And I would say that
Yeah, there's a little Chad in every Virgin.
just a little bit maybe, but they can cultivate it or something. But I think that for the most part, this is a very Chad thing to do, because we're actually putting ourselves out there and creating something and doing it publicly. And, you know, a lot of people don't really have as easy of a time doing that. And I feel very comfortable doing it. So
Sweet.
kind of nice.
I don't know that I feel super comfortable doing it, but I do it. Really, I just want attention. And I have a lot of opinions on things of various quality.
Well, wanting attention, I mean, that's pretty self-aware. I'd say everybody wants attention up until they get married and have kids and start to want people to stop paying attention to them so that they can just settle down.
Yeah, I think there's a sense that I've had in my life that I am the protagonist of my story, or the main character. And I had this thought when I became ready to have kids, which was this year. I'm 35, and I finally did the mental gymnastics to be ready. There was this sense that I would no longer be the main character of the story, and if I had kids, that they would be the main character, and that my role would switch into like supporting them in that. And it felt kind of good. Like I feel kind of ready to not be the protagonist of my story.
Honestly, I think that would be really good for you. We've known each other for almost a year now, and I think the idea of you being able to step back and let yourself relax and not expect so much out of yourself, but simultaneously to have responsibilities and people that you really care about building something with, so children and a wife, I think that sounds really good for you. Although I'm 21, and what the hell do I know?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds good to me too. Like there's a way that I'm always trying to figure out, like, have I done enough to be worthy or or something? And there's like some people that advocate that you should just like hack your brain so that you believe you are worthy no matter what. It's kind of like the Buddhist or hippie way. It's like just believe you're worthy. Like, and for me, it feels like having a family. I imagine, I haven't got it yet, but it imagines that like if my kids are alive and growing and I haven't killed them yet, and like I'm giving them like a reasonable home, like that's like some base level of, ooh, I'm doing something meaningful and good. And then any extra creativity or something I have is like gravy on top. That's what I imagine that it'll be like. Whereas like right now, like my creative pursuits need to like fill up my whole quota for meaning. And that puts like a ton of pressure on them. Like I am not living up to that. I judge myself incessantly.
Oh man,
about that.
I can definitely see that. I think that you'd probably be able to have a lot more fun and express more truly if you didn't have that feeling. You know, that sense of pressure really like pushing you forward and everything. But that being said, I've got a huge perfectionist streak myself. I often am thinking, oh man, I need to be doing everything better, and I'm always optimizing components of my life so that they're closer to my ideal vision and things along those lines. Lately though, for the past 2 months, I've been learning how to relax. And I know that phrase sounds pretty weird, but at this point, I don't actually have clear delineations between things that I like to do and things that I want myself to do. I actually don't know the difference between those two things. And so I've gotten to the point where I've realized that I need to relax. And so I've been just allowing myself to sit back and watch Gossip Girl or just read more on the couch or just lay down on a yoga mat and listen to audiobooks. And it's been really healthy, honestly. It's like a sigh of relief happening continually.
And can you do that like intentionally and not compulsively?
Who knows, man? It's really hard for me to see the difference between those two things, which is what I've been trying to describe. It's like, what is an intention? What is a compulsion? Do I have to do it? I don't know. I think generally compulsions start when you can't stop doing the thing, even if it's negative. And so far, I don't really have much of that in my life right now, and I feel really thankful.
Yeah, so you've been learning how to relax, and like so far you haven't hit any negative side of that. Like you haven't felt compelled to like binge on one of your favorite ways to relax, even when you're probably overdoing it or something like that.
Well, I don't like to relax enough to do that.
Yeah.
Oddly.
So as far as perfectionism goes, like you actually seem to be one of the more successful people at it. Like you've been like really successful at optimizing various parts of your life. And it even sounds like you were like optimizing relaxation or developing a new habit of relaxation there.
It's always hard for me to know how psychologically healthy it is. I generally feel pretty healthy, and I do think that I've been successful at it. My mom always tells me to slow down and that I've already done everything I need to do, and that if I just stop now, then I'll be fine. But there's no real halting function that for my life as a whole. I get halting functions within specific areas of my life. I'll say, oh, I've gotten good enough at diet for now, or something like that, or I've gotten good enough at this for now, but I've just got so much energy and it's got to go somewhere.
Yeah, I'm just noticing. I'm much more of I'm a very different type of person from you. I have very low industriousness, and I'm a slacker, and I have to force myself to do anything. And there's like this existential terror that it will amount to nothing that sort of chases me and like drives me forward. And that's like the only way I can get myself to do anything. And modifying habits is like the hardest thing, because I just don't have the energy for it or something. Like I am a mess.
I don't think you're that much of a mess, but I've known you, and I've seen the messes that you've made for yourself, and you've seen some of the messes I've made for myself in the past year, and it seems like you're getting along pretty well. But I hear that you've got this existential like terror that's driving you, and that your intrinsic urge is to relax and just play around.
Yeah, there's something, there's something I've been playing with recently, which is like discomfort. So I threw out all my alcohol because alcohol takes away my discomfort. Like it's definitely something I can use when I'm feeling like some sort of like tension, and it'll calm me down.
Yeah.
But I'm still playing. I just started playing StarCraft again, and that's another thing that does that. It will just sort of it prevents me from facing the like the dread of existence. And I think it's really good for me to face the dread of existence.
Yeah, I think so. Facing the dread of existence. Sometimes I think I do that too much, honestly. The other weekend, just a few weekends ago, I was hanging out with some people, and they recommended that I try gabapentin, which is just a very, very like standard drug that prevents nerve pain, and that is often known for getting people to have higher verbal IQ, and to get people to be more social, and to kind of be less in their body and more relating with other people. And I had this strange experience where I noticed that I actually got incredibly anxious the next day, and the anxiety lasted for about a week. And that had never happened to me before, because generally I'm pretty emotionally stable, but I was very, very anxious. And I had some other health issues with some carpal tunnel going on at the same time. But it was interesting because I noticed that when I lost the sense of pain that I had, and like the physical pain in my hands, and I stopped being able to feel it, I got this incredibly massive wave of anxiety because without the pain, I couldn't orient myself and move my body in the correct direction. And so that numbness was incredibly terrifying to me.
Is this also a metaphor for, or like a lesson for avoiding existential pain, do you think?
If it is, I don't see it yet.
I mean, something like, okay, missing the physical pain, you're terrified because you're missing one of your sources of feedback. Maybe like existential pain is also a source of feedback that we should listen to or something.
Yeah, I would say that definitely aligns with what I think, at least. I think that when you don't have that feedback, or you're ignoring that feedback that your body or that your mind is giving you, it's generally negative, because because problems get bigger the longer you let them sit. I remember in college I had this roommate, and me and my roommate were in the fraternity, and we were the only people there that had a clean room. Every other room in the house was so dirty, it was disgusting. I'm telling you, like flies, it was terrible. Dried alcohol on the floor, all sorts of stuff. But our room was clean, and he was a lot more anal retentive than I was. I was pretty chill about it. I would just clean up or whatever, and we got along really well. But I learned something about cleaning then that I've tried to apply to the rest of my life, which is, if you just clean up as you go and you don't let a mess build up in the first place, it really isn't a pain in the ass to have a clean place. It's only a pain in the ass if you keep letting the mess build.
Yeah, I still think that I'm kind of learning that lesson. I let my messes build enough, and then I stop. The thing that really bothers me, the thing that gets me to be clean, is if other people will see my mess, and that comes from Burning Man. Like if I'm sharing space, I learned at Burning Man that you just have to keep yourself clean, or you have to clean up public spaces. You have to tend public spaces, and then I guess there's also some shame or embarrassment. Like if I'm having a woman over, then like I thank all the women that I've been on like single dates with, even if nothing came of it, because they've gotten me to clean my place. And so I owe my cleanliness to that a little bit.
That's really interesting. I'm noticing a large difference as we talk, which is there's this huge dichotomy of internal motivation and external motivation. So motivation from social pressures, motivation from other people, motivation from how your family's going to think about you, or what your dad's going to think, or anything like that. And then motivation from the inside, or motivation from some like internal goal setting that's going on. And they're just such massive, there's such incredibly different forces.
Would you say that you have like a lot of respect for yourself, or so you have a lot of internal motivation? Like what's your attitude towards yourself that allows you to have internal motivation? Like what's that?
Well, I got really into, well, I don't know, honestly. I think it could be that I never had a father figure, and my mom always gave me just unconditional validation. Just, she was always happy with anything that I did, no matter what. And so there wasn't really any external feedback. And so the only feedback that I had was the feedback I would give myself. And so it just got really, really, really harsh and critical, and it very fast. And I'd say I'm probably less that now, but I would say that's still the underlying tendency.
So you got used to being your own boss.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Because I never had another one.
I want to do a little fan service a bit. I know I'd like to talk about like some of the topics that you that you like to talk about on your Twitter. So I know you have like 1 million Twitter followers or so.
Yeah.
And some of them are here.
People.
So what topics have been on your mind lately? Like, what have you been thinking about?
Let's see. So I've been thinking a lot about Christianity. And
Sweet.
I know you love that topic.
I do.
You were actually a very good mimetic model for me for a lot of this year, without me really realizing it. But you were really into the whole Buddhism thing for a while, and you could really speak my language with meaningness and all of that. I know I'm throwing out a bunch of references, and we can delve into any of them that you want. But it was really helpful to me, honestly, for you to be able to speak my language about Buddhism and ego annihilation and the infinite freedom of not being attached to the material. But I was really challenged for a long time by your Christianity in spite of that. And it really served as a wonderful model for me for coming back into my own faith. As I was raised Christian, but in middle school or so, I stopped being Christian, mostly just due to bad influences from friends of mine and not really being able to relate to a lot of the culture that I was a part of. Because everybody, when I grew up in the South, and everybody always told me, hey, you just have to feel it in your heart. But they were also telling me you need to go to school and you need to become intellectual and you need to be logical or rational. And these two ideas of just faith and this rational scientific thinking just didn't really jive for me. And they just kept telling me to feel it. And I didn't know if I was feeling it. And I got really anxious about whether I was feeling it or not. And I decided I wasn't feeling it. And eventually I just couldn't find a way to make it feel right to me. And so in some way, in some immature way, I just turned away from it and just rejected it completely and said, well, this isn't for me. And I tried to depend on that rational spirit for a long time. And so it was amazing for me to hear you be able to speak my language of rationality and all of that, and then also to really have a strong faith going at the same time with that mystical component.
Yeah, it's been it feels good to hear you say that. I notice I'm starting to get a little bit of like tingly kind of energy flowing through my right leg and my face as you were talking, which is something like I think my mystical senses engaging. I guess I wasn't aware. I guess I was aware somewhat of that. I was an influence on you, but your Christianity and how you think about God is actually seems a lot more developed than mine. Like it seems like yours is more precise. If I were to talk about my faith, it would not be quite as precise as yours. So there's definitely a lot of legwork you've been doing or you have done that I have that is outside of my influence. But this idea of faith, I think in the lesser Christian religions, I think they have
the lesser religions.
Yeah, like these Protestants that aren't very smart.
Okay. Sure.
Like the evangelicals and the Pentecostals and the Jehovah's Witnesses and other sort of I guess Christian religions that are influenced by like pietism or like a lot of the Baptist denominations. Like they have this idea of faith, which is you just believe some proposition as if it were factually true without any evidence for it. And that's what faith is, and that's what saves you. And that's not the conception of faith that you work with or that I work with. I think ours is very different.
I'm curious to hear more about yours, because I honestly feel I mean, I studied philosophy for a long time and psychology, so I feel like I have a really rich language for talking about my psychological transitions and my transitions from different sets of logical propositions. But I feel as though I'm really just coming into my own and developing a really childlike understanding of Christianity, and I don't feel as though I have this same intellectual understanding of the history or anything along those lines of Christianity. And so I would say I definitely have much more of a mystical understanding through negative theology right now. And I imagine that it's similar to yours, but I'd love to hear some of your language around it.
Sure. So I think negative theology is great, by the way. There's I have this thing I think about, this way I think about it, which is that God is the most complex, not complex, but he's like the ultimate, right? Like he's the biggest thing. He's beyond our understanding. He's certainly beyond our understanding. And when you have a very fixed definition of God, when you have a religion that thinks it knows what God wants and it describes him very precisely, it puts God in a little box. Like the Jehovah's Witness God, which is my background, is a very small God, because he can be interpreted very exactly by a small group of men who made him, essentially. And when you have a tradition that has this, I believe it's called the apophatic method, which is the negative theology, and it's like, we can't quite say what God is. In fact, he's the last thing that we could ever say exactly what he is. He's the thing that we can't say. And in pursuing God becomes a very careful, mystical thing where you're like always searching. Like to know God is to search for God. And like that's in that spirit of a question mark is like what gives you the proper reverence for approaching God. And the less you're sure that you already know what he is, like the more you'll find him. Now, the Bible does make some positive statements about God. So I think you can follow those, like God is love. That's a one you can hang your hat on, or that Jesus shows us the way to God. Like he's God in a form that we can understand.
Sure.
God become man. But like the God of the more subtle faiths, the ones that have a mystical tradition and are more careful in how they talk about God, is a much bigger God than the God of the unsubtle faiths that try to hammer into you what they think he is.
I think that's true. For me, I really love the way that you're talking about this. I would say that you're really underselling your understanding of these things, but because I think a lot of other people that would proclaim to be interested in this sort of thing aren't coming at it from this approach. They're just looking for a bigger box to put themselves in so that they'll stop being as afraid. Or as Sloterdijk would say, they're looking for a sphere to contain their world within. Just like we used to think that our world was the center of the universe and there was a sphere around it that was containing it, and then there was another sphere containing that one, then there were more spheres containing each other until eventually God was on the outside of those spheres. And we knew where God was. This was the medieval conception, and they claimed that outside of that ninth sphere, it was called the Empyrean, and that was where God lived. And then at the center of the earth, that was where hell was, the furthest place away from God. And so they had this very spatial understanding of all of these things. But as you're talking about, none of these metaphors that we use, none of the language that we use can ever describe God or reality, and God as the creator of reality, just insofar as it's ineffable by definition. And for me, I really came from this implicitly logical positivist mindset when I was younger. I was very implicitly believing that there was obviously a perfectly objective truth to the world, that science could determine what was objectively true, and that there wasn't any secrets. There weren't any secrets anymore, and that we were on the way to figuring everything out, and the mystery had been completely destroyed by man. And I didn't think this as a kid, but the more rational I got and the more I learned, the more I thought, man, all of these scientists have it figured out. But when I first really started to engage with the psyche and the unconscious mind and mystical experience in college, I really began to be interested in Buddhism to a massive extent, and Taoism and things along those lines, where I first encountered this idea of ineffability. So the inability to say something. So language is just very simply us forming associations. So every time I've seen the word cup, I formed some association with the thing that the word cup meant. And eventually I had seen the word cup so many times that I stopped even thinking about the specific cups that I had seen, and it just meant this like container that holds a liquid that I can drink out of. But you've seen an entirely different set of cups than I have. And yet we can communicate with one another and talk about cups and know exactly what each other are talking about. But I first started to encounter ineffable experiences that I couldn't convey to anyone else with language in a way that they would understand. And then I would say that I would not say that that's my first experience of God. I think everyone is experiencing God constantly. But that was the first time that I realized this whole truth thing that we've been talking about. Maybe there's not some perfect answer that can contain all of this, because language literally can't convey it unless you have an experience that matches that exact experience that someone else had. Did that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. I think we might be a little bit unusual in that Buddhism was also a pathway to Christianity for me. And it was having these ineffable experiences and coming to view what reality is as made up of experience, as instead of as made up of objects. That was sort of the opening to the world of religion and spirituality for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that that's one of the reasons why it's so easy for us to talk about this stuff with each other. Because, and maybe one of the reasons it's so gratifying is because I just don't find that many people that have had experiences that match closely enough to mine that it's enjoyable to talk about these things.
Yeah, we're pretty weird.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. The thing you said earlier about people wanting a God to like have a sphere to contain reality. I'm not so sure that that's like entirely off the mark. I think when I think about what faith, I said what faith is not, but when I think about what faith is, like there is something, I think you talk about this. Faith is like the assumption that reality is good, or that God is good. That God and his creation are good.
I would say the Christian faith is that. Yeah. I wouldn't say faith generally is that.
Yeah. So that trust, it was funny. I was actually with Guy at a circling event last night, and he at one point in a circle he was talking about Jesus, and my ears perk up whenever anybody talks about Jesus. And he said, Jesus was the guy and here I start talking in my guy voice. Jesus was the guy that, they did the worst thing possible to him. Like they tortured him and they humiliated him, and he still looked around and he said, "This is good."
Mhm.
And it's not to say he didn't have pain and sorrow for the pain in the world, but there's he it, he had that faith that this was good, this was worth doing. His life was worth living, even though he ended up nailed to a cross.
Sure. And he lived his life in the way that he did, knowing that this would happen all the while. And there's a way in which that could be seen as a metaphor for our own lives. We all know that we're going to die. We all know we're going to grow old, and that our body's going to fail on us, and that one day most of the people that know us or knew us are going to be dead, and that one day people aren't going to remember what it was like to see us or to hear us laugh. But there's something that keeps us going and that keeps us waking up every day and doing things that we don't like to do and doing things that we do like to do, and still find joy in all these things. And I agree with what you're saying, that this Christian act of faith is this unconditional statement that creation is good, and man has the potential through living rightly to bring the kingdom of heaven to earth.
I think that belief that this is good is like unconditional love of God.
Yeah.
And if we do that, then maybe God gives us unconditional love back.
I think that that's true. There's a quibble that I have, though, which is one about idealism. And the trap that I want to make sure that we're not falling into here is just by saying that reality as a whole is good. For me, at least, that's a statement that it. Are you familiar with the word timshil?
No, I'm not.
So I read this book, East of Eden by Steinbeck, and it really centers around this word. And it's a Hebrew word, which means thou shalt rule over it. And a more accurate translation is thou mayest rule over it. Thou mayest rule over it. So you have a choice to rule over sin. So what I really think is that one can look at reality and say, reality as a whole, it really is good. But that doesn't mean that one has to look at every component of reality and say, oh, well, people are so angry at each other in this political climate, or there are homeless people on the street. All of that is good. All of these individual things can be bad, and you can look at that negativity and the human mishap and error while fully committing to reality and to the idea that reality as a whole is good, without losing sight of these individual instances or these systemic problems that you can fix. If anything, for me, the faith is one that through effort over time, man can conquer over sin and can fix these problems. Not that just through stating that everything is good now, we'll just live in an idealistically lovely world, but through the sweat of our brow, really.
I want to avoid what I hear like a lot of hippies talking about, which is like everything's perfect just the way it is. Yeah. That's not quite what I mean. And I think it sounds like we're almost like stumbling into the old faith versus works controversy. But I do think, I mean, I love the Orthodox tradition, and in Orthodoxy, I think there's this idea of salvation through the word synergy, which is God and man working together. So God, aligning yourself with the Spirit of God is the way to salvation, and God will help. He wants you to do that, and he's totally on board with that. But there's a choice that you make to work with him, and so which is as opposed to other faiths which have I forget the Greek word for what they use, but they say like God saving you is completely by his own will, and there's nothing you do or don't do about it.
Like a predestination thing.
Yeah.
That's there is a Greek word for it though. I don't remember it. Telos.
There's another one that they use in particular that I don't remember. I was just talking with a Protestant friend of mine the other day who's also been to divinity school. He knows all of them.
Man, I want to talk to some more of these divinity school people.
Yeah, I'm happy. If you want to consider Protestantism, Derek's probably the smartest Protestant I know. That's probably not true, but he's the smartest preacher that I know personally.
You can't piss off any of the other Protestants,
Well, there's a lot of Protestants in the world. So if I said smartest Protestant I know, then some Nobel Prize winner is probably a Protestant, and he's going to be object to my statement.
Sure. So we got a question from the audience, which is Paul Martin. He said, I experienced these steps from Jesuit-educated Christianity, strongly considered the priesthood for a bit, while studying philosophy in college, rejected Christianity, and discovered Buddhism, Taoism. What triggered the search for external meaning and mysticism as opposed to an internal search? Do you want to take us up on this one first, Jacob?
Sure. It's like I don't quite get the question completely, which makes it exciting for me to try to answer it. So let's just have words come out of my mouth and see what happens.
It'll be improv.
Yeah. Well, I've always been a little mystical, but I feel like, Buddhism is also mystical to me. It's very mystical. It is because it deals in ineffability. The idea in Buddhism was the first place that I ran into this idea that there's some knowledge that can't be spoken or talked about. Like in Buddhism, some of the truths that you run into is actually they can write down a recipe for you to taste it, but you have to go and taste it yourself. And it's not guaranteed that you're going to get there, and it's not completely guaranteed that your version of whatever kind of experience they're trying to point to is the same as what other people were pointing to. But you read the description and you sort of taste the flavor of what you had, and then you kind of try to navigate that way, but you can never really know. And so let's see. Someone says, I think it's a false dichotomy. Religion mythology is an external interface for our inner world. Let's see. So what's external about Christianity? There's not a whole lot external to me about Christianity. Okay, so there is something a little external, which is that the difference between prayer and meditation. Meditation is process of seeing what is, and being with your experience, your most bare level of experience, and whereas prayer is a dialogue. You are speaking with God. So there is this relational component to it, but it's not completely separate. God is not completely external. And in the Orthodox faith, the point is to become one with God. And so there's some way that God is external, but also internal. We are also a part of God, and like it's sort of trying to straddle the it's sort of trying to straddle the fence between dualism and monism, and saying no, neither, and very much like the Trinity does. And so that's the Orthodox conception of our relationship to God. Is like, it's like we're kind of God and kind of not God. And so when I'm having a dialogue with God, it's not completely external, or completely internal. It's sort of straddling the line between that. And like the deeper your relationship with God gets, like a lot of time I feel like God speaks to me through like I've been feeling really on fire lately, with the spirit per se, and as my pain, just sort of my spiritual pain has just, I've had this flame in my heart, as the days have been getting shorter, and reminding me of the breakup I had a year ago, like because it happened around this time of year. Like I've been having that existential angst and pain come back, and it's really like that pain also feels like a little bit holy. Like it feels like it directs me. It feels like it points me in the right direction. And when I listen, when I pray, I can really feel God. And I don't know if that he's out there or in here. It's like a little bit of both.
So I really liked what you were saying about the monism and dualism. So I've been thinking about Buber recently. He's a philosopher that talks about the philosophy of caring and relating. And Buber's thought is that there are two fundamental types of relationships. There's an I-thou relationship, where I act. You're familiar with this from Guy, but
yeah, I probably just have the highlights, but so go highlight it again. I'll probably need it.
Sure. So I'm going to bring up a quick quote because I really, really think that the quote hits home. But the gist of it is that there's two types of relationships. There's an I-thou relationship and an I-it relationship. And those two fundamental things are at the center of all of our relations to the world. It's either a subject-subject relationship where I'm treating you like a person which is containing the sacred, which contains something that transcends my understanding, regardless of whether I think that I've created a box that can contain it, or whether I'm treating you like an object, like whether I'm treating you just like this box that is this input-output cybernetic system that I can control through conversational dialogue in various ways. So the quote that Buber has is, "No isolated I exists apart from relationship to an other. Dialogue, or encounter, transforms each figure into an ultimate and mysterious center of value whose presence eludes the concepts of instrumental language." So, to me, this whole idea of what prompted one to stop searching within the internal and start searching within the external is that I think that fundamentally, for me, I didn't stop searching within the internal. I've been searching really deeply within the internal for the last few years. I would say I just started also searching within the external and realizing that the external is also a source of wonder and the unknown. I really like Nicholas de Cusa's metaphors about this. He was a 14th century mathematician and theologian. And he's been very, very influential in my thinking about negative theology. But de Cusa says that God is an infinite sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. So God is simultaneously everywhere, and because he's indivisible, he's infinitely concentrated in every location. And there is nowhere that you can look where he isn't. But what he also says is that there is an infinite void, an infinite gap that's unsurmountable, that separates man from being completed with God while within this physical life. And from what I understand, what you were talking about, Jacob, it seems as though the Orthodox try to bridge this gap to the greatest degree that they can. And that seems like an incredible pursuit within one's life. But for me, at least, I think it's just as much of a journey as any other, and that it's something that one can approximate, like a Taylor series, and likely not something that one can just be at some point in time and then have gotten there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think that it is given for sinful son of man to complete the journey to God in this realm. But I think we can get closer, and know we can get closer.
Yeah. Tim Show.
Pardon?
Tim Show. Thou mayest conquer over sin.
Yeah. There's there's something I have a little bit of aversion to, like, being in the realm of abstract theology too much. Like, like, I'm very, like, I think that's one realm, and it's useful, and like to have the correct ideas about that, like, inform this lower level, which is pragmatics or practice. Like, how does one pursue God in a way that works? And that's, like, really cool, man. Like, I didn't know that you could actually, like, go looking for God and, like, kind of find him, or find parts of him, like, slowly over and over, like approach the asymptote. It's incredibly exciting. It might be it's one of the most exciting things you can do. It's so cool.
Yeah, that does sound incredible, and it's something that I've only just started to do, or there's a way in which I've realized that it's something I've been trying to do the whole time, and without even really realizing it. But for me, the longer I've tried to give advice to people, or to try to talk about how can you pragmatically go find the way, the less that I've wanted to do that. And the more that I've realized that I hardly ever even understand the other person well enough to know what they should be doing to put them closer to God.
Yeah, well, I think it's useful for people to hear from, people who want to do something, to hear from people who have done it or are doing it. But I think there is a proper amount of humility, which is, yeah, people are really different. Like, they are unfathomable. Like, we talked about our differences. Like, we started off the podcast kind of, talking about our differences in conscientiousness and energy and things like that. And yeah, I don't know, like, what works for you would work for me, or what works for me would work for you, but I can tell you what has worked for me. And there's also, I think it's really hard speaking in public, especially, capitalism has we have this attention economy, and there's always this temptation to oversell, because, and I think it's very important to not oversell. And I think it's very important to talk about how fucked up I am. Like, so when I tell people about what I'm excited about and what's worked for me, like, they know that if they followed down the exact road that I've gone down, like, there'd be a lot to be displeased with.
Everybody has flaws.
Yeah. So I want people to learn from me, and to value what I've learned the hard way, and also modify it in a way that doesn't have all the hard way in it. That would be best. I would hope people could, like, arrive where at the good things I've found at 35, like, by the time they're 22. That would be that'd be great.
Well, my birthday is coming up in less than a month now, so let's see.
Oh, my birthday is coming up in January.
Oh, okay.
It's 36 is breathing down my neck.
Oh man, yeah. That's gonna be crazy.
It's fine. I'm like, man, I have so many ideas about what I wanted to do in life that that I've just not done, and it's like just learning to let go the right amount.
Yeah.
I think it's still important. Like, gosh, like these hippies and
They're letting go
progressives.
smoking weed all
Well,
day
they're like, hey,
on the
you
streets.
just gotta let go of all expectations and enjoy yourself and follow the path, and life will show you what you need to know. And I'm like, no, I'm gonna fight for what I believe in,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna fight for what I think is good. But at the same time, like the 35 years that I've spent largely pursuing the wrong things, it's done. It's over. I can't get them back.
Sure.
There's no use crying about it. So that's sort of I'm trying to hit that balance of letting go of the pain of regret, but still being driven to pursue my values. And some of my values are like spontaneity and improv and and like accepting what life gives me. But it's not all my values.
Sure.
It's not all.
There really aren't that many men with convictions today. And that's something that I really appreciate about you, is that you do actually have values that you really care about. And I think that as time goes forward and we humans continue to have more and more of a capacity to change our environment and to control different parts of our environment and different parts of where our attention gets directed in mass, it's very important that somebody has convictions and has an opinion about how things go, because otherwise these anonymous forces of capital just take over and just bring things towards whatever this anonymous force or this mass desire will lead. And I think that we're entering into an age where conviction is more important than ever and rarer than ever.
Logan, we're coming up on 1 hour in.
I know.
I'm
Yeah.
still having a good time. Are you having a good time?
I am having a good time, but I want to get some cookies and some more chamomile.
Yeah, I wanted to refill my chamomile. You want to like leave the stream on and get some cookies and chamomile, and maybe I'll just leave a chat message so people know where we went, and then like we'll do like half an hour more or something.
Sure, yeah, I could do that.
Okay, cool. Let's see. I wish I had like a little banner that I could. What was that?
I want to switch to something that's more pragmatic. Or like I feel like we covered some of this, like some of the theology and some of our background, and I'm interested in talking more about just like modern things that are going on.
Cool. Let's see. Well, we do have a question in the chat that would draw us back into maybe a little bit of theology, but maybe we could time box it. Try to do it in 5 minutes.
What if we tried to? What if we just tried to give something succinct?
Okay.
And then we took our little break, and then we came back.
Sounds good. So the question is, what drew you specifically to a Christian faith? How do you understand other types or categories of faith?
And I feel like I've got a good answer.
Great.
All right. So specifically Christian, I really think that it matters a lot to be connected to your cultural traditions and to be connected to the truths of your fathers and their fathers, and to be able to respect that these intellectual traditions that have been built upon within literature, within philosophy, all of these writings and all of these thinkers over time who built up incredible structures and dialogues and exchanges, arguments and art and artistic movements meant to honor God and all of this, that honestly there's so much more information and knowledge contained within that than an individual trying to craft their own religion or trying to craft their own independent faith could possibly even begin to encounter. And I always hear within the technologists and computer scientists of the Bay Area, we just need a new religion. You know, somebody needs to invent a new religion so that everybody will, you know, start acting properly, or so that civilization won't collapse or something. So we need something to believe in. But for me, I just look back to the immense and incredible traditions that we already have and say, look, these people really knew what was going on and had a better conception of reality and their own place in it than we have. And we've lost our place, but we can find it again. As for other types and categories of faith, I do really like the Buddhist conception of Shruta, or a translation would be confidence. So the implications of that are that the Buddhist has confidence through direct experience of the truths within Buddhism. So it's this really phenomenological claim of, I've experienced this and thus I believe it. And I think that one can transport that same conception to the Christian sense of faith, and I would think that I do. But it's interesting because what I'm going to avoid is saying that other types and categories of faith are wrong or something along those lines. But I am going to say that they're just not applicable to me. And that's all I've got.
That's pretty good. I liked that quite a bit. I wanted to say, can I take a crack at it?
Please, I'm going to grab some chamomile and cookies. Do you mind?
All right.
I'll be.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, grab some chamomile and cookies. I'll speak to the chat. I only need to grab chamomile, so I can take a shorter break. But for me, coming back to the Christian faith as a not so young adult, it does feel a little bit like a redemption of my childhood, where I had a much less subtle and Christian faith sort of pummeled into my head. And I've been surprised by my reapproachment to Christianity. I think I've found wisdom and capability in it that I didn't know was there, and that wasn't in the faith of my father. It's been good to me so far. You know, this time last year, I went through a breakup of, you know, the longest relationship I've had in my life, and I was sort of sitting with that pain and sitting with regret, and like seeing how it was the person that I was that made that happen, and how being the person that I was, I could never have a fulfilling relationship that would last, that I could never commit to anyone. And the pain of seeing that, and like realizing that I had to like burn off large parts of myself if I wanted to have the kind of life that I wanted, was super painful. And just sort of that grief and loss. I think like Christianity is a, I mean, it sounds, I feel skeptical of myself because it does help me hold the pain. It helps me hold myself together and point myself in a good direction. And like, I'm not sure, I think I'd be alive without it, but I wouldn't be, I'm not as confident. And it's certainly helping me thrive more. That's not a very good answer. I felt like I wasn't very pleased with that answer. Well, I'm going to go heat up my chamomile, and I'm going to leave a little message in chat. So, hey, chat, if new people come in, just kind of like chat at them and let them know that we'll be back in like, a minute. Hey, everybody, say hi to Pumpkin. Pumpkin, say hi to everybody. This is my kitty. While I wait for my tea to warm up, I adopted this kitty about 4 years ago, and I love him very much. Aren't you a good kitty? Isn't that a nice kitty right there? Just waiting for that water to heat. Cat break. Oh, we already got 2 likes. This is awesome. You guys are great. And one of them's not even mine. I bet you Pumpkin got one of them. Didn't you, Pumpkin? Didn't you?
I haven't liked it yet. I have been having a blast, but I haven't liked the video yet.
All right. I'm going to let Pumpkin go.
All right.
Let's see if he lets me go. My water's ready out. I'm just going to pour it.
Perfect.
Let me know when your chamomile cools down a little bit, and I will teach the stream the sacred chamomile ritual.
So my chamomile has not cooled down yet, but
mine's still piping hot.
It probably will faster than the other one did because I didn't get it quite to boiling.
Do you have an electric kettle?
I do, yeah.
They are the best.
They are really good. All right, so I want to put forward a few potential topics for our nitty-gritty next half hour, but I want to see if we can bring it down to earth more, and I will put forward a few topics. We could either talk about the current state of the Bitcoin ecosystem and cryptocurrencies generally. We could talk about something vaguely modern and political, but I kind of feel like it might be better to prepare more for that rather than go off the cuff. But up to you, really. Then we could also talk about something like accelerationism or capital.
Yeah, let's bring it down to earth.
I mean, it is like practical and material, which is kind of what it is. Does any of that stand out to you, or do you want to put forward some suggestions?
I saw you tweeting something the other day about some crypto project you're really looking forward to. Is that Dios?
Dios is pretty interesting, and I don't even know if I would say it's a crypto project.
Okay, what was the thing you were tweeting about then?
It was probably Dios. I generally tweet about Urbit or Dios or other topics, but I don't really talk about much technology other than Urbit, Dios, Twitter, and Bitcoin.
Hold on. Could I read something? I've been really into T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets, and I think this speaks to a little bit. This isn't bringing us down to earth, but it speaks to our previous conversation a bit.
Sure.
But to apprehend the point of intersection of the timeless with time is an occupation for the saint. No occupation either, but something given and taken, and a lifetime's death in love, ardor and selflessness and self-surrender. Kind of goes on like that for a while. This book is something cool, man. Let me read another passage which talks about podcasts.
We talked about podcasts. This is T.S. Eliot.
Yeah. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Words move, music moves, only in time, but that which is only living can only die. Words after speech reach into the silence. Only by the form, the pattern, can words or music reach the stillness, as a Chinese jar still moves perpetually in its stillness. Not the stillness of the violin, while the note lasts, not that only, but the coexistence, or say that the end precedes the beginning, and the end and the beginning were always there, before the beginning and after the end, and all is always now.
That's really beautiful. Honestly, the thing that it makes me think of is Bitcoin. To be honest, always is now. Was that the quote?
Yeah, and all is always now.
And all is always now. So that's something that I really want to. Oh man, I want to be able to quote it while I'm talking about it, but let's see which one is it? I found it.
Yeah, T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets. It is part 5. I think it's chapter 5 of part 2. No, it's chapter 5. It's sort of like part 5 of the first book.
Perfect.
So Burnt Norton, part 5.
All right. So let's see if we can do a hermeneutic analysis of T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets in relation to Bitcoin.
But this book is like so cool. It is so cool. That's all. That's the last thing I'm going to say about it. But there's a lot more to it than that.
I really want to read it. Let's see. So words move, music moves, only in time, but that which is only living can only die. Words after speech reach into the silence. So I would say that this is something that most people don't understand about Bitcoin, which is that what Bitcoin truly is Bitcoin is right now the conjunction of the ledger, so the record that exists right now, and simultaneously the economic incentive, which everyone understands exists, to mine that currency and to put proof of work into it. So by proof of work, I'm really saying the idea that you can put work into something, and in the present, if you put the work in, there's a probabilistic chance that you will receive a reward such that there's an economic incentive for you to continue working. And T.S. Eliot might say that work moves perpetually in its stillness. So Bitcoin on the internet is always still. It's always there. You can always use it, but it's moving perpetually. There's always a new block every 10 minutes, 144 a day, and it's not going to stop running. And this constancy, this living constancy, it's interesting because it's created an entirely new world that coexists with our current world. There's the world of those that are interacting with this durable, constant thing. And there's the world of the people that are not interacting with this durable constants. And as T.S. Eliot would say as well, and the end and the beginning were always there, before the beginning and after the end. Well, one might think about the information theory of this, and there's actually a lot of information theory relating to black holes. And I'm not going to talk about something that I don't know a lot about, but
you're doing great so far, by the way. This is classy stuff.
but I will say that information has mass, and that information tends to collect and gather more information to it. And so if Bitcoin is this constant, durable, ever-growing chunk of information, well, one might think that that's relatively similar to a black hole. And the end is always before the beginning, and the end is pulling the beginning towards it. So if you're
And a
interested,
black hole is timeless.
a black hole is timeless, yes.
So once it might seem like time is passing to the place where a full node will require the information density of a black hole to run. But once we get to that point will have always been.
Yeah. It's an interesting thought exercise. What do you think about it, Jacob?
Well, that's a good question, Logan. I think it might require another verse of T.S. Eliot to really completely encapsulate my thoughts about Bitcoin.
I really think so. Yeah.
Let's try this one on for size. In my beginning is my end. In succession, houses rise and fall, crumble, are extended, are removed, destroyed, restored, or in their place is an open field, or a factory, or a bypass. Old stone to new building, old timber to new fires, old fires to ashes, and ashes to the earth, which is already flesh, fur, and feces, bone of man and beast, cornstalk and leaf. Houses live and die. There is a time for building, and a time for living, and for generation, and a time for the wind to break the loosened pane, and to shake the wainscot where the field mouse trots, and to shake the tattered arras woven in with the silent motto, "In my beginning is my end." So this is really speaking about the inevitable passage of time, which in which things that have a lot of structure are crumbled into things without much structure, and then born again and recycled, at least within an ecology. Which brings us to Bitcoin mining, which a lot of people are not so fond of. But I think in this verse, T.S. Eliot is really talking about proof of work, and probably the only way that we can tell that time is passing is by the sacrifice of what exists for what could exist. And the sort of the decay of structure proves to us that time is stepping forward to the next moment. And in the same way that the heat waste generated by mining is the sacrifice of potential work for byproducts that tells us, that progresses us to the next Bitcoin block. It's a choice. It's a choice that we make. We could have spent those resources on something else.
It's a risk.
But it is a risk. But what could be more valuable than the passage of time?
That's such a good point, Jacob. I really love that analysis. You did a great job. There's not a thing that I would change about it. I think that really hits home to one of the ways in which Bitcoin relates to time. I've seen arguments for Bitcoin actually being time as well, as not just which you were hitting upon, but in a more direct fashion. That, oh man, that was just beautiful. I love it. I really love the last 5 lines of that. The houses live and die. There is a time for building, and a time for living, and for generation, and a time for the wind to break the loosened pane. I've really been feeling within our culture today as though it's time for the wind to break the loosened pane, but also a time for living and for generation. I've been feeling a great call for myself to generate more and to create more as I watch the wind breaking many of our old structures.
Yeah, I think that's That is a feeling that I've been having lately too. There's a feeling I've been having a lot of mourning, of like seeing cultural decay and institutions breaking that were once awesome becoming corrupted. Um, but there's a feeling also of generation, or regeneration, like seeds grow out of compost, and like I know that if this falls and crumbles, it is not the final falling. um and there's like just fertile ground for the new to be born.
Mm.
And it's something too that I've been thinking about, as I get a little bit older, and I get excited about starting a family. Like, it's just time for new life.
Yeah.
Like I see, like my older relatives are starting to die, and my father almost died this year.
Mm.
And if there wasn't new life, there would be only decay. There'd be only death. Because things tend towards entropy, including humans, including human institutions. We
Yeah.
haven't figured out how to make them last forever.
No.
And so I think the response to entropy is new life, new hope, a new dawn.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent point.
Hey, can I read you a poem I wrote?
Oh, please, please.
I wrote this after a mushroom trip
Oh, Lord.
when I first had this feeling. It's not like polished, but I think there's some good bits to it. So maybe I shouldn't be reading this because I don't think it's good yet, but there's good in it. So with that like caveat that will protect my shame, I'm going to read it. There is green life down under the dead brush, roots still living, made of the same stuff. It will grow again and branch out. The giants that once were are not now, but life remains, an untappable well. Down in the heart of the earth, where the warm soil has a will, a relation of the one life, living soil, begging to be green again in the fullness of time. It will ripen and fall again, but now is the time for growing, as it once was.
I really love that.
Yeah, it almost has a little T.S. Eliot to it, which I hadn't read T.S. Eliot at the time. I'm gonna maybe aim for that when I've been planning. So I wrote that like I don't know, like 3 or 4 years ago,
Yeah.
and I thought of, and I was started thinking about it again because I had this feeling of, like really mourning a lot of things happening in the world, but also having like this unreasonable optimism and this sense of like green shoots and coming out of the ground again. It's like the old tree that's 1,000 years old is dying and falling,
Yeah.
and it's terrible. It's terrible. It's a tragedy, but also there's like these green shoots coming out of the ground.
For me, I think a lot about how with every time the green shoots come out of the ground, there's an existential risk. With every generation, there's an incredible risk that knowledge won't be transferred, that people won't figure out how to maintain the structures that need to be maintained. And somehow, beautifully, through God's grace, every generation has continued to make it. But it's not inevitable. It can happen. I would like it to happen. But there's this massive risk with every new generation. And so with every generation we risk it all. And
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot.
and generally have received it all. Can I read a poem that I have?
Please.
So I wrote this about 1.5 years ago. and it's about it's about surrender more so than anything. The day is early yet, my limbs limber still, my will clinging to this wretched prison. Yet I am soft, wet, lacking in substance. I test my constitution and find it paltry. In fact, I am as poultry before the wolf, sitting, clucking incessantly, as my doom looms nearer. As day shifts to night, my thoughts bleary become, and in becoming I am. In being, I breathe. In breathing, I surrender. In surrendering, I become indomitable.
Sounds a little Taoist.
Yes, I think I was in a mood.
Hey, can we do the sacred chamomile ritual?
I would love to. I would like to do one thing first.
All right. I'll entertain the crowd. Da, 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 da.
All right. I have 2% battery remaining, and so I want to make sure that I plug myself in before anything.
Oh, yeah. 2 is very low.
2 is very low, yeah. All right, so let's do the sacred chamomile ritual.
Do you know it?
No, I don't. I've done it with you before, but I don't know.
I've never done it over computer, but we look in each other's eyes.
Yes.
And then we sip at the same time.
Oh man.
Because chamomile is the sacred taste that can bridge the gap between subjects. So by experiencing the same qualia at the same time, we have a taste of our unity and oneness.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
And, yeah. So through chamomile, 2 little motes of God can reach out and touch each other.
That's pretty beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh man. So this has been a lovely conversation. Is there anything that you'd like to do before we close out? We've got about 3 minutes before we've been doing it for an hour and a half.
I feel pretty good about it. Thanks for doing this with me. I want to do this pretty frequently. So yeah, if you like this conversation, follow me on Twitter. I'm about to, that's kind of a big topic, but I'm about to switch, I think, all my Twitter presence to be lightly pseudonymous. So like I want to do a Scott Alexander style thing.
I see.
Where everybody, if you try, you can find Scott Alexander's name, but if you don't try, it's Scott Alexander, and that seems to provide enough protection that he can say mildly controversial things and keep his job, which is what I want.
I'm doing something pretty similar with Young Deleuze.
Yeah, so it's I feel like if you're going to use your real name, you need to be making a living off of commentary.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because it's just it's not even the culture war or the cultural revolution that is going on in America, or being persecuted that I'm afraid of. It's just the logic of a corporation is that if someone has any sort of public profile, it's why take a chance?
Sure.
And that wall can be super hard to breach. So I don't want to make an impassable wall like Satoshi has. Satoshi needed it because he was really throwing the finger at the established order. But I just want a little bit of separation, and I think that's the right amount.
Yeah.
So I want to still feel like I have skin in the game. I don't want to be pseudonymous or completely anonymous. I want me to be on the line, but I just it's just really managing the fucked up mind of capitalism that I'm working on.
It's a hard task. Well,
yeah, I mean, I just hate that I have to like start a new blog and a new Twitter and a new YouTube and like build my audience from scratch. But if I make good content, they'll come.
just change the names. Like,
Well,
just
I can go
searchable.
for it.
Anyone would search it.
What was that? I'm sorry.
I said you should just change the names of the blogs or whatever.
Yeah, maybe
Redo content.
Yeah, or move the content over or something.
Sure, exactly.
But the followers I'll lose.
No, not if you change the Twitter name.
You can change the Twitter handle and name, right?
Yeah, you can change the handle and you'll keep all of your followers.
Great.
And then you could immediately remake the Jacob Lyles one, and then you would have both.
Sweet. Just have to do it quick so some other Jacob Lyles doesn't steal it under me.
Yeah, exactly.
Temporarily unclaimed. If you Google for my name, the top hit is like this kid in Kansas that like saved a bunch of kids from a building that got felled by a tornado, and he like went through the wreckage and like pulled some kids out. The guy was like 16 and the kids he saved were like 5.
Oh man.
Yeah, I'll never live up to that guy.
Who could? All right. Well,
all right. Good speaking with you, Logan. Thank you for preventing me from being virgin alone in my room on a Friday night.
Have a good rest of your night, Jacob.
All right. Peace.